Where's the Zoom?
They're next to each other.
Hello friends, wonderful to see everyone here. We're gonna start our talk in just a second. I think this is the time that we are starting. So my name is Roman, this is Elton. For those of you that don't know us,
Hello.
we are from the Paititi Institute. And today we'll talk about failure, one of my favorite subjects. So the wisdom of failure, and something that I've been reflecting on is how central it is in our lives, starting from very small age when we are learning to walk to the time that we are already adults and farther than that. And the wisdom of failure, so how essential it is. Without learning how to fail, then we can't really succeed in anything in life. And the failure has a lot of wisdom to it if it's possible to get out of the emotional rut and tune in into what is happening. And so, yeah, it's in my life it's been like that many times over and over again, how I had to really learn how to fail well and fail to the degree that I would even fail to fail eventually, right? And then that success is kind of like the darkness doesn't exist in itself, it's just the absence of the light, and as soon as a tiny bit of light comes in, darkness just dissipates. And in my experience also, when I can really tune in into failure and really see what it's about, then I start to learn from it, and then I fail to fail. And when I fail to fail, then I succeed. So the failure, to me, it has this kind of connotation. Also, I've been talking to a friend recently, and he shared with me this theory about the stoned ape. And it's been observed in nature how there's different animals and different species, they do prefer fermented fruits. And even the fruit flies, and how the human evolution has been in some ways linked to the fruit flies. So it seems like there's this pattern that when the fruit flies that fail to procreate, that they tend to be drawn more so towards the fermented fruit, and then they get drunk on them, and they try to find some kind of alternative means to experience that divine union in their lives. And it seems like in human history as well, there is this pattern of really finding a way to deal with our dissatisfactions and lack of fulfillment. And some ways are more detrimental than others, but in a way that has also led to the human philosophy and the different shamanic based traditions around the world, where people could not find satisfaction from just their immediate material environment, existence, and then they tried to find a greater sense of fulfillment and satisfaction that cannot be really found here on this earth. And the failure was in a way an essential contributor to human evolution, to rise above just this hamster wheel of existence and see that there is something else available to us. And that's something that I've been also reflecting on in my own life, how the different failures that I've experienced in society and early on in my life, both within my physical body and my physical health, and also the environment around me, and all of the different values that I could relate to in society that I couldn't really be fulfilled or satisfied by. And then that led me on this path that I'm very grateful for. But it was all of those things that initially seemed like curses, and then I really tried to find a relative temporary solution, and then that did not bring much fulfillment and satisfaction as well. And then eventually that made me start asking questions. So I can relate to being the fruit fly, and then trying to taste different fruits. And that of course goes back to the biblical story of the Adam and Eve, and that fruit of knowledge and experience of life. And to me that's also something that is very essential for evolution, is to actually fall from grace, to lose that initial connection, what in psychology is related to as the womb separation syndrome, coming out of this very nurturing, warm, fulfilling, pleasurable state of being held and loved unconditionally, and then needing to learn how to tap into that consciously. And in a way that's also related to this fall from heaven, fall from grace, and then really getting to know life through one's own experience, and then reconnecting to that original state, in that original state of no separation, but fully consciously, in a way that it can never be lost again. And so initially one has to get lost in order to be found, and failure is very essential for that, in my experience. So I'll let you comment a bit, Alten.
Yes, luckily I work in the kitchen, so I can work with fermentation. Yeah, as you are speaking, I'm just thinking about in my life experience, like failure was part of my success, in the worldly realm. Like having difficulties, but behind the difficulties there was a drive to keep going. And it's like thinking and having creativity. Okay, this is not working, this is not working, this is not working, but there is a drive behind. Like how can I keep going? And yes, the results are not appearing, and then at some point I can relate. Yeah, like things change and results come, but like I have succeeded in life, but I failed. With that success, I failed to fulfill my heart. And like the worldly success didn't give me what I was looking for on the inside. And I think that, that part of failure is something meaningful in my life, because I was asking, okay, so what's life about? And this is how I came to this path. And that failure in a way was the starting point of me asking, what else is here on this planet? What is my purpose? If worldly success is not fulfilling me.
Yeah, so this sense of unfulfillment, the sense of dissatisfaction, also what in the Amazonian tradition people relate to as the excessive comfort makes us weak. If there's no challenges in our life, then it's not really possible to grow and evolve and discover. And the sense of discovery is actually, in many indigenous traditions, the sense of curiosity, the sense of discovery is more important than the different pleasures and successes in life. And so to continue learning, right, in the Andean tradition, also similarly to the Amazonian one, we are always children of the universe, no matter how old we get. And there is a sense of discovery, of awe, of ingenuity that is the most essential in people's lives, to continue, to what life is really about, to really represent that childlike essence, and not to lose that. Because if I just stuff my head with all kinds of knowledge and all kinds of concepts and ideas, that's not necessarily gonna make me alive. Yeah, I'm gonna think that I know everything and I don't need to discover anymore, I don't need to learn anything else, I've done my part in that, and there is no life there anymore. If there is no more discovery, no more learning, no more failures and trials and errors, then there's no life left. It's kind of like when all sense of mystery is gone, then life becomes very boring. If everything is figured out for us, then what purpose is there to life? And that's something that keeps me going in the most challenging situations. I can tune in into that and see, well, this is happening to me right now. I'm experiencing, I'm in the hole, I'm deep in the hole, and I got myself there, and I have no one to blame if I really look at it in that way. And so then a question comes up: what can I learn from this situation? What is there for me? Is there a message for me there? And even in the most difficult struggles in my life, there was always a message there. And this inner struggle and despair, despondency, also definitely opened me up enough to look at other possibilities in life. And I have to give it credit for that. If there is a virtue in failure, then the virtue is to not get stuck only on one way, or not to think that there is only one way to go about something, and to remain open to new possibilities, to new ideas, to new ways of being and discovering what life is about. And so that's what I found to be very helpful in the midst of the most difficult times and moments, to not think that it's just randomly happening to me and I'm just a victim of my circumstances, but to see that there is actually intelligence in every situation that is happening to life, even if I don't see it. Especially if I don't see it, there is a lesson there. There is something meaningful that is happening, and this universe is intelligent. Everything, every situation, every person, every coincidence, there is deep meaning in it that I may not see immediately, but it doesn't mean that it's there. This is another thing that I've been reflecting on recently. There is this term that is called the God of the gaps. Right, in philosophy, it's this concept, the God of the gaps, which basically is a flawed concept that says if you don't know something, if you don't see something, then it means that it doesn't exist. Right? So that's been kind of a philosophical discussion for years, where people say, well, if I cannot touch God, if I cannot see God, if God cannot be proven, then God doesn't exist, right? But just because something cannot be proven, it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. And quantum physics have been discovering that in our modern sciences. And this is actually something that also happens in life when I'm going through something and I don't see the light at the end of the tunnel, and I'm not experiencing the resolution of a certain situation, and then I just want to give up. I want to throw in the towel and just be despondent and say, well, nothing is working and it has no meaning, and I'm just a fruit fly, and show me where is the nearest pile of rotting fruits, and I'm just gonna bury my head in there. And then of course there are more exotic fruits and more exotic fermentations, and you become more of a connoisseur, fruit fly, until suddenly a whole other realm of existence opens up. And it is also through this trial and error that it's happening, but not merely as a fruit fly. There has to be some consciousness there to really look into it, to see what it's really about. Okay, I keep failing, I keep doing the same thing, expecting a different result, and I keep failing. And then my mentality is, no, I just have to try harder. I have to try to do the same thing harder and expect a different result. Maybe I didn't do it hard enough last time, and that's why I failed. But then I start to see, actually it's not whether I try, how hard I try, but it's how consciously I try, how much I bring the ingenuity into it and really see what it's about, instead of just keep banging my head against the wall, expecting the walls to suddenly disappear. And that hurts after a while. So then to see, maybe I don't have to break those walls down. Maybe there's a door somewhere, or maybe a window at least. Or maybe I can climb over that wall or walk around it. So there has to be some ingenuity about it. And then of course there are examples from some great masters of the past. There's this originator of the Zen tradition, Bodhidharma Dhammo, when he initially came, and he faced that proverbial wall in his life, to the point where he actually decided to face the real wall. He decided to make it very tangible, very real, and he sat in front of a wall for about 9 years, if I'm not mistaken. And he sat in front of that wall without blinking. And according to the legends, he really made sure that he keeps facing that wall day and night, and without closing his eyes. And then after many years of sitting in front of that wall, at a certain point the wall no longer bothered him. It's not like the wall disappeared, but the resistance and this kind of like trying to break through the wall disappeared. And in that moment, it's this resolution, the inner obstacle that is no longer bothering oneself. The obstacle becomes the way. The failure becomes the success. Also another really wonderful teacher that I have great respect for, Pema Chodron. She actually wrote a book about failure called Fail, Fail Again, Fail Better. It's one of my favorite books by her. And she also speaks about that, how in her life as well, it was failing in conventional society, failing in her relationship, that actually made her into a successful writer and a best-selling author, where she can actually relate to her failures and the wisdom within those failures, and how that brought her on a path of ultimate fulfillment and satisfaction that is not based on pleasure and pain, but is based on this ingenuity of the heart, the awakening of the heart-centered presence, and the ability to see meaning in every experience of life that keeps helping us to discover the timeless joy that never goes away, the greatest fulfillment that is not bound by external circumstances and conditions. And so this kind of process in Buddhist psychology, they call it the dukkha, which sometimes is translated into suffering, but the actual meaning, the more closer translation, is dissatisfaction, and sometimes related to also as this kind of experience of being kind of like in a stuffy room, like there's not much spaciousness or place to move, or there is a certain linear way of thinking and no way to improvise and to experiment and explore. And then I get stuck in a certain narrative that feels very disempowering, and it's a downward spiral from there. So it actually begins from this inner rigidity, in a certain restriction of the way I think, the way I perceive the world, the way I relate to different situations. And it's this knee-jerk reaction kind of that I develop, in a certain personality that goes along with it, that acts in a very specific, in a very predictable way in all kinds of circumstances. And so then this failure is teaching about that. Is teaching, okay, well, I keep doing the same thing and I expect a different result. And I don't know any other way. And I'm afraid to fail. And at least I know that I do this and I can rely on that. And there is a certain degree of success and reliability. But then there is failure in the results that it brings. So then what can I do in order to actually approach the situation objectively? Just because something worked in the past with one situation doesn't mean that it's always going to work with all the other situations, and it's not this one size fits all, and each situation is different, unlike anything that happened before. And then I keep applying my tested methods to new situations without being present with them. And then of course it's a very mechanical, very robotic way of going about things, and there is a rigid mentality that is connected to that. So the first lesson in failure is to break down that all of those stale concepts and ideas in my head. And then of course I also reflect on that in terms of the situation in the world today. There is this famous saying, history that is not remembered is meant to be repeated. And then I recently saw another kind of addition to that saying that, or what is it? Those who don't remember the history are bound to repeat it. I think that's how the saying goes. And another saying that I saw in addition to that, and those who do remember history are cursed to watch everyone else repeat it. Right, something like that. And then to also to see that, of course, yeah, that can also bring a lot of frustration to me sometimes, when I can see the world is repeating the history, or when I can see people in my life that are continuously hurting themselves and others by repeating the same mistakes over and over again and not being aware of it. It's kind of like sitting on the cactuses that we ourselves have planted, and not even remembering that we have planted those cactuses, that we have created the causes for those conditions to happen, and not even wanting to see. It's not comfortable to see it. You know, at least for me, I can speak for myself. It's not comfortable because then I have to take responsibility for it. I can actually change it, but it's a lot of work. So I'd rather pretend like it has nothing to do with me and I'm not responsible for it, and it's someone else's fault, and then to see how it's happening in lesser and greater scales in the world, that it's easy to blame it on a certain fringe of the population or on a certain group of people in the world, or to create a common enemy that we can gear against, instead of taking responsibility for the inner shadows. And in every war, the other side is always demonized. You can look at the history of the world. In every war ever to exist in history of humanity, the other side was always demonized. It's like all the inner shadows, all the untransformed issues on the inside are projected on the outside because it's much easier to do that and than to fight something else, instead of focusing on the inner conflict, on the inner war, and the failure that feels so disturbing that I don't want to even deal with it and see it. And then in the outer war with all of the problems and pain and suffering and disasters, is easier than to face the inner conflicts. Of course, it's in the long run it's not easier and it brings a lot more suffering, but who cares about that? Let's just focus on the here and now. Right? And that's also that some of my teachers, they laugh about this kind of modern tendency to talk a lot about the here and now. And the one of my teachers, he laughs, he says everyone is so excited talking about the power of now, but people tend to dismiss the power of our past habits and the power of our stale concepts and ideas that keep us stuck in conditioning and disempowered experiences in life. And without that, without recognizing the power of our habits and our old patterns and the issues that keep haunting us in our lives, then the power of now cannot really express itself in that way. It's kind of like we can talk about love and light all we want, but without getting to know the workings of conditioning that keep us trapped, it's kind of like wishful thinking in that way. So to really reflect on the failure, to reflect on conditioning, on what keeps us stuck, keeps us in this vicious cycle, in the hamster wheel, and then to understand what it's really about. And then the power of now can be very helpful. But it's worthwhile to take some time and to get to know oneself, to get to know the all of the different defense mechanisms and coping mechanisms and all of the fronts that have been developed and all the ways that one is being inauthentic with oneself. And then to see it not from a place that, oh, this is always pointing to me being inadequate and bad and how much I failed in life and I'm not worthy or I cannot earn the recognition or love or whatever it is, but to see it without the certain kind of agenda or a certain predisposition, but to see actually that there is wisdom in that. All of those coping mechanisms and habits, they also have some wisdom in them, and they developed from a good intention. Like, I don't know any better. I have this very childlike, pure innocence in me, and I cannot find a place for it in the world, and it seems to keep getting me in trouble, and I have to go by the world standards and succeed based on the world standards, and this makes me fail. And so I'm gonna develop a certain front, a certain image. I'm gonna try to conform and get in, get in line with everyone else in the world. And then to see how there was a good intention about creating that kind of front, creating that artificial personality construct. There was a good meaning behind it, and there was something good that happened. It served its purpose for some time in my life, and then it stopped serving its purpose, and I keep doing it, expecting that it's gonna serve that purpose again, and it's not. But why is it there in the first place? So even like there's been research about smoking, for example, and it's been found that people smoke because sometimes it's the deep inhale that people long for, kind of like, connecting to the chest, or to it's this unintentional meditation. I just want to take a break from the being in the vicious cycle, in the hamster wheel of life, and I just want to step out and have some objectivity in relation to the situation. Or sometimes it's about this infantile tendency of longing for the mother's breast, and that unconditional love. And so there is something good there. It's not just a bad habit. But then how can I do that more intentionally? Okay, unconsciously I'm trying to reach towards that. Whatever I'm doing, whatever coping mechanisms I have in my life, I am trying to experience that connection that I cannot experience otherwise, that I'm failing in. And then I can experience a glimpse of it, just to remind me that it's still there. And there is a purpose for that as well. And then I can start seeing how can I do it more and more consciously. Another thing about failure I've been reflecting, but I'll let Elton chip in a little bit.
Yeah, I think like reflecting about my process is what keeps me stuck is actually not being honest with myself and judging myself. It's like not like seeing the bad habits and judging them instead of learning how to be honest and say, okay, this is what is happening, and it's not bad. But once I start saying, oh, this is bad and this is where I fail, but even in that, yesterday I was reflecting about this, and there is a place that can actually hold this failure, which through these struggles that sometimes I experience, and I see the blessing in the failure. It's like, yeah, there is the heart has a place that can hold. It's like this tenderness, this child that I'm trying maybe to find love in and in cooking or in relationships, and they are not lasting. And when everything else is failing, it's like, okay, how can I open my heart and be like this mother that can care for this child, which is the child for me is me failing, me judging myself, me getting annoyed with myself. And it's like, okay, how can I bring this this motherly love into this failure and hold myself in there.
Yeah, I find that it's all of those parts of ourselves that are being brought together, and it's this change of attitude, right? As I shared before, how it does start in the mind, is this rigid mentality, and to see that I can either be this helpless child, or I can be this person who cares and is helping, trying to do things for everyone else, but is not really doing anything for oneself. And then how to really connect all of those pieces together, where there is the motherly love in oneself, there is the child in oneself, there is and all of those, of course, they represent different energies. So someone brought about how they've been finding the 5 elements, and I think it's from the Taoist tradition that we also work with, to relate to the different energies, emotions, and experiences in our lives. And so to see that we all have those parts of ourselves, but often they are fragmented, they are not really connected together. And so to really connect those dots within oneself, to see how there is this light of consciousness within ourselves. And then there is this capacity of love within ourselves. But often they're not connected. There is this mind, the monkey mind, that is somewhere in the clouds, and there is this love that is buried deep under the different defense mechanisms, and the fear of being vulnerable with oneself and the world. And then there is this scared child, because there is this also the fear of discovery, the fear to fail and not to have that love and not to have the insight what it's really about. And if there's one thing that I can trust in this life, if there's one thing that I can trust, it's that there's always something to learn in every situation. That's one thing that I can trust for sure, that there are always lessons coming through. And just knowing one thing that I can trust, not much, but if the one thing that I can trust, that already makes my heart blossom. Just that, knowing that it's not random, that there is this deep meaning, that there is this deep lessons and wisdom of life that are coming through every situation, every experience, and I can trust that. And just knowing that allows my heart to be open. And that's a big part of it, is to see that I cannot ever understand the mystery of life. But I can understand it enough to trust in it. Just a little bit. Just 5% of it. If I can understand it enough to trust in the mystery of the heart, then that's already makes this life worth living. And then, of course, to do that, right, it's not easy in the midst when the shit is hitting the fan, excuse my French, when in the midst of it all, when all of that happening, and to actually trust that there is something to learn from that situation is not easy. It takes a lot of training to fail in many small ways, and to recognize and to train the mind to think in that way, to see the life in that way, not to get disempowered and go into the soap opera dramas, the mental gossip in the head, but to snap out of it and to bring a fresh perspective, and not to get dragged down by what is happening. And then, of course, another essential quality is a sense of humor that I find very helpful in those situations. If I can smile at myself in the midst of my drama, then things are not so bad. And it takes training also, right? It's like another, I forgot who is it by, but another favorite quote of mine is that a sense of humor is not the ability to tell a joke, but it's the ability to take a joke. right? And life is always playing jokes. And then to be able to reflect and to see the jokes that are being played, and it's not that uh, the joke is basically there to make me feel more miserable or disempowered, but it's there. The universe is constantly laughing at me, um, and I often find that to be this cosmic giggle. It's like this, um, just this truth is too simple for my complicated mind to understand it, and it's just about being, and how my complicated mind tends to overthink and overcomplicate things, and then um, I'm not able to experience the joy of being, the joy of just being here and now, right? Is this story of my life that keeps recycling this kind of caricature of who I am, and keeps making me believe in that caricature, but then seeing that I'm not this garbage can with my name written in on it and my life story accumulated inside, telling me who I am and who I'm not, and what I'm capable of and what I'm not capable of. And to see that it's this recycled kind of gossip, that just this drama keeps happening, and I tend to fall for it sometimes and think that that's who I am. And actually that's just this broken record that it's time to um, basically let go of, and discover the symphony of the spheres, the symphony of the universe. And that relates to the 5 elements that I started mentioning. The 5 elements is that dance within ourselves, and it happens on many levels, and it works with those essential energies of life that relate to the different emotions and qualities and aspects of our existence, and also inner organs, and they all complement each other and support and nurture each other, and also control each other. So there is the generation and control cycle, and then different emotions, and then the same emotion can be healthy or unhealthy. So let's say the fear in the water element, and the fear can bring that receptivity, right? It's like this fear that makes me get out of the falling boulder from a mountain. It's the rain season right now. We recently drove to our reserve in the rainy season. It's a very small road that with lots of bends and curves, and it goes through the altitudes of 4,600 meters, and there can be a big truck behind every corner, and landslides right now, and boulders falling, and yeah, there is this fear that is healthy, that makes me alert, and that I don't fall asleep behind the wheel, uh, and at the same time, if that fear is out of control, then it becomes unhealthy. Then that fear leads to all kinds of um, negative habits and coping mechanisms, and becomes very draining. I keep reaching for the comfort zone. I keep trying to hide in some kind of experience or a state of being. It's like that fruit fly, right? Again. And then I'm not really alive, I'm not present, I'm hiding in all kinds of habits and routines, and this stories in my life that keeps me asleep, that keep me kind of in these self-destructive patterns. And at the same time, within that water element, there is the seed of life. Right? It's like all of those different inhibitions and fears of failure. And then all of those inhibitions and fears, they start to be awakening. It's kind of like I have to become, like sick and tired of being sick and tired for the seed of life to sprout again. Everything else is fallen, right? It's like the winter time. It relates to that water element as well, where the tree loses all of its leaves, where everything is barren, and only the seed remains buried in the frozen ground. And then to reflect on that seed, okay, well, what happens if I lose everything in my life? What's the worst case scenario? I like to, to go there once in a while and reflect on that. Okay, like, if I'm like, I have this fear, and fear has big eyes, and it's the fear of the unknown. It's the failure, the fear of failure is also the fear of the unknown. I don't know what will happen, and it doesn't seem safe, and I'd rather, kind of invest in this false sense of security and certainty on the inside, security on the outside. But it's false, because everything is changing. And then why invest myself in creating this grandeur illusion if I can actually invest myself in developing a loving relationship with uncertainty and impermanence and change? And the waters are very much about that, right? Because the water is not stable. It's changing, and the water can have so many different shapes of it. And so in the winter time, the water solidifies, and there is time to reflect on the essence. Well, okay, worst case scenario in my life right now. So then what is the essence? What is the meaning that can never be lost? Everything else can go. Everything is changing, except the spaciousness of the heart that can allow that change to happen, that doesn't resist the change. And that is the only thing that is unchanging. And so it helps me to reflect on that. Well, yeah, I'm afraid of the unknown. I'm afraid of losing something in my life. So then, if I'm afraid of it, let's meditate on what happens when I lose it. And I go there and I meditate on it and reflect and see what is the wisdom there, what is the meaning. And then it doesn't mean that I have to lose everything, but if I'm not afraid to lose everything, I can enjoy everything fully. And I find that to be very helpful, to really go into those places that scare me. That's another book by Bema Chodron that I really like, The Places That Scare Me. To really go and see what is the wisdom there and what is the meaning. And it's within those places that I find my greatest treasure. And it's the treasure of being human. It's this perfection of being imperfect, right? And so then that allows me to keep failing wholeheartedly, and to actually learn how to fail gracefully. And the more that I can fail gracefully, the more I can actually fail to fail. And then, yes, success is imminent. I invited friends with that quote. And I do find that it doesn't even have to be called success, because success also has a negative connotation for some people. But it's just this kind of like to fail so good that I fail to fail. and that's quite fulfilling. And I was reflecting on that last time when we tried to do this talk, and it didn't happen. And then it's kind of like this fail to fail. That's a good sign. I think that's a good sign, trying to do a talk about failure and then failing in that. And I appreciate those kind of little cosmic giggles that happen in life, and do take it to heart and reflect and appreciate and bring gratitude into all of the failures in my life. So that's something that I've been reflecting on. And then of course the community of failures. I'm also very grateful for that, because that's what makes us reflect. It's what makes us become really curious and have this investment in it. It's like, yeah, I really want to see what it's about. I'm really curious. There is something there. There is a lot of mud. And I've been running away from this mud and keep getting stuck and, kind of like planting my face in it. And finally I can start to see what is this mud about. And actually that's a really fertile soil for the lotus of the heart to blossom from. If I just stop running away from it and keep falling into it, I can start to cultivate it. And so that's also very essential for the seed to grow from. You need the water, you need the earth, you need the sunlight, and all of those elements, right? You need to prepare the earth and use some metal tools potentially. I'm reflecting on the 5-element system again. So all of those elements, right, are essential for the seed to sprout, and they have to come together in a perfect balance. A little bit of this, a little bit of that, and each one is contributing. Just the mud, right? Life is not all about the mud, but mud does have an essential place. And if I keep trying to run away from the mud, then all that exists for me is the mud. Or if I'm just continuously splattering myself with mud. But actually there is the seed, there is the mud, there is the sunlight, there is the water, there is the tools that I work the mud with. I don't have to keep digging in it myself with my face. And all of that has meaning. And then everything comes together and I can really appreciate. It's like this perfect storm that is happening in my life, that is happening in the world. And then within every storm there is an eye of the storm. That's where the birds like to go into during the storm, because it's very calm in the eye of the storm. And so how can I cultivate that bird's eye view in my life that helps me see my life through the eye of the storm, and not be swirling chaotically like a leaf in the wind, but to bring that consciousness to see through the eye of the storm what is happening, right? Otherwise it's like it's all fun and games until someone loses an eye. And I found myself in that situation quite a few times in my life, right, where I lose the eye of the storm, I lose the eye of my conditioned ego, and all hell is breaking loose. And actually it's this perfect storm for the eye of the heart to awaken. So that's also something that I've been finding helpful in that regard.
So with all this, patience
Right.
is something that is necessary
Yeah,
to cultivate through the whole process of failure.
absolutely. And with that is a very good point that Elton is bringing. So patience, thank you for being patient with us so far. It's quite a subject and I love reflecting on that. And
Yes.
I'll just look at some of the questions that came through so far. In my experience, anyone experiencing real success in life has done so through mastery of failure. Yes, my experience as well, very much so. And so, yeah, also just reading JC's comment about successes and failures and the 5 elements, so that also relates to the Taoist saying that crisis is an opportunity. Right, that's something that it's up to us to relate and reflect on. And Gaspar asked to develop a statement of failure to fail, to give it a try, to walk in the mystery. That's very much so. It's like this willingness to really engage in life wholeheartedly and to get lost in order to find oneself and to basically appreciate the learning that is happening through all the failures and successes, and knowing that both will pass, and not to be geared towards the destination, right? The journey is the destination. So that's also very much about that, and it's this opening of the perspectives that I do believe that everyone can change, and that includes myself. With all of my habits and habitual patterns and all of those stale concepts and ideas and the rigid personality, and I do believe that it's possible. And I have seen that it's possible. Sometimes it's hard to see it, but over time, if I focus long enough, I do see that it is possible. Maybe not right away, but it's that mystery that I find also to be very essential to be humbled. There is this quote from what is it, that organization for that Justice International, what is it called, that organization? Amnesty International, that's the organization. I saw a quote that was shared by Amnesty International, by one of their people, that said that it's possible to live one's life in a way where you don't make any mistakes. It's possible, but that kind of life would not be worth living. And so we all make mistakes in life, and some of the greatest discoveries in human history happened because of mistakes. And to live a life knowing that we will all make mistakes, then actually worse life living, because then it's possible to learn from mistakes. Otherwise, if I'm afraid and I'm afraid to do anything because I'm afraid to fail, I'm afraid to make a mistake, I'm afraid to do something wrong, then it's not really life. So then I'd rather live a life where I make mistakes and I can learn from them and continue to evolve than living a life that is completely sterilized and I'm just hiding in a hole and burying my head in the sand like ostriches do. And then what point is there to life? So that's something also that reminds me that Gaspar asked about. So JC said, when the demon was always war itself. And that's true, right? It's the ignorance, not knowing any better, and it's this kind of unconscious tendency to avoid the inner conflicts and not to face ourselves as humanity. and in that way we cannot relate to each other. If I cannot deal with my own issues and my own inner conflicts, if I cannot come to terms with them, then it's not possible for me to have relatedness, tolerance, kindness, and recognition of what others are going through. So definitely it's the war itself that is the demon, and it's this inner conflict war. It's this war between the mind and the heart, the war between the mundane, kind of superficial values of society and the deep calling of the heart, and how often they are at conflict with each other, and how hard it is to reconcile, right? The strongest pains, they are not physical pains. They are those emotional wounds. They are the wounds that relate to the innocence of our lives, and how hard it is to integrate it into our modern society that has no place for that. And so then to really reflect on that, and how can we make a change in ourselves and be the change that we wish to see by reconciling within ourselves. So another saying that is very similar: do my lies not tell you as much as my truths can easily be adjusted to do not my failures tell you as much about me as my successes. So that's also a really good reflection. I find there was actually, I was reading how in World War II they were trying to study the airplanes that have survived the attacks, the aerial attacks, and they would see where the bullets hit, and then they would reinforce those places, but then it did not help, right? Like the same, like statistics show that the same amount of planes were falling down, and then this one scientist, he actually made this discovery. He said, well, he said, you guys are studying the airplanes that have survived. You should study the airplanes that have been shot down, because the airplanes that have been shot down, they show where the real issues are. And instead of trying to reinforce those things that were just hit by mistake, or like hit superficially, not by mistake, but you have to really study the failures in order to create successes, instead of studying the successes. And that's something that's been also shared about the millionaires of the world. I was also reading that research, how it's very popular nowadays, where this millionaire teaches people how to become a millionaire. And pretty much no one is able to follow their steps, because it's their steps, right? And again, there's been research done on this subject as well, and it showed that actually it's worth studying more what has failed than who has failed and who has succeeded, because they succeeded and they have found a certain niche that is already filled, and they have reached a success in a certain way, but that doesn't mean that everyone else will succeed in the same way. And instead, actually studying what has failed, and then connecting that to one's own life, and then connecting to one's own ingenuity and the passion, and of course the qualities that allowed people to succeed, like the determination, the patience, the focus, they are helpful, but the specific techniques and the tricks and all of those things, they are not so helpful because they have worked in a very specific conditions and circumstances and during specific times that are not repeated anymore. And so then to really look into it from this lens of failure and relate that to one's own life and make it real to one's own life, and also to see what does it mean in my own life. To me, I don't care about millions. That does not mean success to me, and also like Elton shared. But what does success really means to me? What does fulfillment really means? Or resolution, reconciliation, and what life really means to me. And then I can gear my life towards that. And of course, when I do something wholeheartedly and I find deep relevance and meaning and inspiration in that, then it doesn't matter the outer kind of signs, or like I made something of myself and I have this trophy to show. I don't care about the trophies or the outer signs, but how can I keep the spark alive? How can I keep doing what I love to be doing? Because then it's no longer work for me. I'm not doing something that is just going through the motions of it and doing it mechanically, but I find deep joy just in the journey, in the doing of that. And that to me is fulfilling. Otherwise, even if I would have a lot of trophies and a lot of outer signs of my success, but I'm not really fulfilled inside and I don't like what I'm doing and I'm miserable, then that's not really success, for me at least. So that's definitely something that I appreciate, is to see that I don't need external confirmation, but it's really coming from the spark inside. And someone said, if you can't laugh at yourself, you're missing out on the best of life's jokes. Haha. Yeah, no, I really like that. Those are the best jokes. So yeah, the trickster, of course. Gaspar is reminding me about the trickster. And so the trickster archetype, also in all ancient cultures, I believe, there is that trickster archetype that is so essential to life. And the trickster, the Heyoka in the northern Native American tradition, Chiachaki in what is it, in the Irish tradition, the leprechaun. So they are very essential aspects of our inner experience. And the trickster has a lot of wisdom to teach us, and the trickster is also testing to see whether there is readiness to go to the next evolutionary phase, or we need to go back and actually really take some lessons deeper to heart. And so the world is a trickster in a way, and it is this trickery of the Great Spirit that also has brought me on this path. And it's this, in a way, a lot of effort to face oneself. It's not easy, it's hard, and there is a tendency to avoid facing oneself until there is no other way. Right? It's the wisdom of no escape that the ancient traditions work with, where there is no other way, there is no way out but through. And when I really tried to avoid facing myself, and I tried to find escape and hide in all kinds of ways, and then at a certain point I could no longer do it, because I could no longer lie to myself. I really tried and I failed. And that was essential to really step on this path, to face myself and not to pretend and put up a show. And definitely it's not for everyone, or even on a spiritual path. A lot of people would like to go and work with someone who puts up a really good show, who pretends to be perfect in every way and does a really great job in that, until some kind of a scandal ensues, of course, which often does when people try to pretend to be perfect. And there's like a lot of scandals happening in spiritual communities nowadays. But I've never tried to pretend. Maybe that's why there were never any big scandals in our organization. But I never tried to pretend to be perfect. And some people don't like that. They don't like to go to someone who gives guidance about spiritual path, but is not this kind of like perfect thing on a pedestal. And I find myself one of the people, and I'm also continuously learning, and I'm also failing, and I'm just finding this ancestral wisdom to really appreciate all of the ups and downs in life, and not to kind of be in this spiritual materialism of floating in the cloud. Oh, I'm gonna get to a certain place where there's gonna be no problems. And that's what I'm selling to the world. But I don't want to do that, because it's not real. That's not a sign of spiritual success when there's no problems. At least according to the teachers that I've had in life, who I recognize to be real people themselves. But actually the real sign of spiritual progress is how much more patient I can be, how much more compassionate I can be. That's according to my teachers. And the problems keep coming, and they don't get lesser. The greater problems come, and then the sign of spiritual maturity is how well can I deal with those problems and not freak out and throw a hissy fit or a tantrum or a drama. And how well can I stay human and relate to others in my situation. And that's something that I keep as a point of reference. And that's what keeps me real also, and keeps showing me that I'm far from it. Right? I continue to practice and cultivate and aspire, but I also have to be real and not lie to myself that I am so spiritual. I've been on this path for so many years. I have this reputation and I can be proud of that. But no, it keeps me real. Life keeps me real, and I'm grateful for it. Doing that essential job. So, So, JC, water can be slow to react because it constantly changes its outlook based on receiving new data. Well, we're always receiving new data, so you can get stuck if you don't remember that the wave pulling back is when you collect data. The release of that is the wave crashing back in. The balance of those two actions is where you gain ground. Yeah, it's this balancing act, right? And it's this homeostasis in medicine, the dynamic equilibrium. It's never static. And that's the point of life, and the Taoist tradition also illustrates. Life is movement. When there is a lack of no movement, no change, then that's death. But life itself, the innermost life, right? Because even in death there is decomposition. But it's no longer my life. It's like, there is all kinds of life forms that are coming in. It's more parasitic life. But the innermost life, the sense of aliveness, comes from this ability to allow change, to move through us, to work through us, to change the inner perspectives of our lives, to keep awakening that greater ability of the heart to be spacious, to be unconditional, the art of no resistance. So that's very meaningful. If you surround yourself with people that have never experienced deep failure, it's probably a pretty boring room and lacking in real world experience. Yes, I very much relate to that, and it's also frustrating. And I've also been reflecting on, there's this story about this king, right? The water supply got laced with some kind of drug, and everyone went crazy. And this king was the only one who had a clean water supply, and he was the only one who did not go crazy, and everyone went crazy, and he was the only sober one. And then he became very miserable, being surrounded by people who were completely nuts. And at a certain point, he basically decided to start drinking the contaminated water supply, because he couldn't handle that experience of being the only sober person surrounded by all the crazy people. And that's kind of like the story of our society, in a way, where we all come into the society, right? Like the mouth of a child speaks the truth. There's this ancient saying. We all come into society with this innate truth, and then the world around us makes us doubt our inner truth and pretend and get lost in this nightmare of society that we live in today, with all of the natural disasters and contamination of environment and wars and inequality and all of the problems that are happening, and then needing to become comfortably numb in this reality, because there's so much happening in the world that it's quite distressing, to say it lightly. And then everyone are hiding in their little worlds and not really wanting to really see and relate and experience what other people are experiencing. And so in this ancient living wisdom traditions, the lineages that we work with, the point is to actually start to trust that innate truth, that inner child, to heal that wounded innocence in oneself, and to honor one's own truth as a state of being. Right? The truth is a state of being. It's not a philosophical concept, and it's just this being open, being vulnerable, being at ease, being present in the heart. It's being, it's not, we're human beings, we're not human doings. And so then to learn how to trust and to abide in that truth, and not to go by the common narrative in the world, and to learn how to think freely for oneself, instead of just buying what different sides of the same Ouroboros snake say about things. Right? It's like this duality. No, it's this. They're the enemy. They're the enemy. But that's a very dualistic perspective. So there has to be this transcendent third in Jungian terms, something that connects the conflicting opposites together, that allows them to become complementary opposites. And that's something that is bound by our inner truth. It's neither this nor that. And there is this greater, more objective perspective into life. So that's also very much and then of course within our lineages, then the point is to really connect with people who have actually connected to themselves, and it's not doing it in the same way as they did, right? That's also a very essential part. You can never find yourself by following in someone else's footsteps. again, you can connect to the essential qualities that they have cultivated, but then you have to apply it to your own particular life circumstances. There has to be ingenuity there, and I'm not just going through the motions and doing what someone else is doing, and then I'm gonna find resolution in myself. That's just, it's a logical fallacy, I think, to go about spiritual path in that way. So there has to be ingenuity and find relevance for one's own life, getting real for oneself. And so the lineage is about that. It's people who got real for themselves and then are encouraging me to get real with myself. And are sharing some tools and practices that have helped them. It's good to relate to that, but then they have to be adapted to whatever path we are on, whatever circumstances, mentality that we have, the time that we are living in. So there has to be ingenuity in that way. It's not just a, what do you call it?
Manual?
Yeah, the instruction manual, right? So, and even with the instruction manual, some of those things, like I open them up and there's a lot to figure out there. And I have to figure out it for myself. And if I just go by what the instruction manual says, it's like I often end up with some extra pieces, right? So yeah, that's something that is very essential, is the ability to be free thinkers and not to go by the kind of like standard hypnosis of society that serves someone else's agenda. But and also in my experience, instead of fighting the system, that also rarely, if ever, worked in human history. So, but what really worked is people who did not fight the system, but instead showed through their own life, through their own example, what else is possible in life. And it's just this, it's just the ignorance is not knowing any better. So it's just this one small example that shows something that is possible, allows it to become possible on a greater scale. And so with our organization, with my path, I decided early on I'm not gonna be on this path for my own personal profit, and I really want to honor these ancient traditions and their wisdom and how they are approached and my own path in life. And I'm gonna stand up for something that is really meaningful to me. And so then I want to see an integral vision of this. It's not like I'm doing this healing as a job and the ceremonies, and then I'm getting profit from it, and I'm trying to adapt to the superficial values of the world. But for me that doesn't really make sense. So then I want to do this healing work and consciousness transformation and evolutionary work, and at the same time work with permaculture and work with preservation of the environment and support of the indigenous people. And I'm going to direct all of my effort and resources in that direction, and that's what fulfills me. And even though it's a long path, and I'm still in the very beginning after 20 years of trying to manifest this vision and needing to fail over and over again, and we are rebuilding our center in a different location for the fourth time now over the years, and to keep starting over, to keep coming back to ground zero, and to keep remembering the beginner's mind, and then to keep failing, but every time failing a little bit more gracefully, a little bit better. And definitely 20 years ago I had no idea what I was signing up for with this, and it was also the trickery of the spirit that actually, if I knew, I probably wouldn't have done it at that time. Now I'm happy that I was stupid enough to do it, but back then I probably wouldn't have done it. And it's that trickery of the spirit. and there's been so much insight, evolution, and actually, deconstructing so many, grandeur, just illusions of ignorance in me. And it continues to happen on more and more subtle levels, and I'm very grateful for that, for all of the failures. Let's see. So, it's funny, one of the biggest examples of that in my life, while I was down there, I wasn't there to do ayahuasca while in Peru. I was there to study permaculture practice and do a study with Miriam. She's my Chinese medicine doctor. Land for business purposes, but because I had long hair and looked fairly hippish, everyone and their brother wanted me to go do ayahuasca. Lol, it will help if you find your answers. Okie dokie, bud. Ha ha ha. So yeah, definitely it's not just the ayahuasca or some kind of a potion that will solve all of the problems, but that's, consciousness is the main healing agent. That's what I've learned in the ayahuasca tradition from my ayahuasca elders. Consciousness is the main healing agent. Everything can support consciousness, but nothing can substitute it. So it's possible to drink, gallons of ayahuasca, but without being conscious and present and learning the lessons and applying it to one's life, it's not gonna do anything, and it might actually make things worse. And I've seen that happen. So, so definitely consciousness is the main healing agent. Okay, so we are going quite a bit over time, and I'll let Gaspar speak. He's been holding his hand for a while. If it was a physical hand, we would have been gotten tired by now. Gaspar, and then it's time for us to complete this time, but based on popular demand, we can keep failing to fail. So we can keep going deeper. You guys can reflect. We really appreciate the reflections. And then send us your comments, questions, also suggestions for our next talk. And we like to collaborate and reflect on things together and find deeper meaning. And in that way, we also become the community that keep giving the truth serum to each other and keep each other from falling asleep and going crazy with the rest of the world. Okay, Gaspar? Are you still here with us? Hello?
Hi, Roman.
Hi, Gaspar. Speak up a little bit. Oops, 1 second. Oh, Gaspar?
Hi, everyone. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah?
Great, wonderful. So I would like to offer a little reading. Like it's not very long, and it's a very, very insightful coyote lesson, and I found it back in a book.
Hello?
I don't know if I have time for
Nope.
that.
Hello?
Hello, Roma.
Hi. Okay, a little, Gaspar.
Can you hear?
Yeah, a little bit, because our internet window here is also showing that it's getting a bit unstable.
Oh, okay. So, are you guys ready for a short coyote lesson?
If it's
Or
short.
it's not appropriate?
Or you can send it to us and we can follow up.
The only thing is I don't have it, on a numeric version.
Hello?
So I think it would take a minute, but maybe I
Okay.
can try to send a picture.
Okay, awesome.
You cut me if it's just really too bad for the line. Okay?
Well, now we're all in suspense now.
Okay, you guys are in suspense, so here it comes. I learned my first coyote lesson in Mexico when Joaquin, my medicine teacher, wanted me to see how ridiculous my seriousness had become. We spent one whole day gathering dried cow dung rabbit pellets, coyote, dog, and all waste, and carefully placing each in an old tin bucket. The next day, we spent mixing all of it together, crushing each part into powder, and slowly adding water to make the paste. After this, I was completed. I was told to mark a circle in the earth with string and a stick, making sure that the circle was perfectly round. Then Joaquin told me to fill the tiny grove in the soil with all of the paste I had made from all of the feces. I was very careful to make a perfect circle and not to let any of the circle be crooked. Joaquin praised my work and how careful I had been during the 2 days process. He then told me to enter the circle and sit in the center until I understood the value of the lesson. I sat there for at least 3 hours, thinking that maybe this was a way to contact the power animals. Finally, Coyote came into my consciousness, took one look at me, and rolled on the ground inside, splitting laughter. Coyote was laughing so hard he could not speak. I was fascinated. While still sitting in my circle of poop, serious as ever. In between his guffaws, Coyote spit out the words that taught me my lesson. For the past 3 days, you have been examining others people's shit, he screamed. Now you have surrounded yourself with it, and you are so serious. You can't even see how ridiculous you look. I start to laugh at myself and imagine Joaquin must be rolling in history at the joke he had played on me.
Okay,
So that's my
Gaspar.
Coyote lesson.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't know if you heard it.
Yeah, we did. Wonderful.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
it's good to look. It's good to look at our, at all of our poop and all of the reactions. So definitely, that's the trickster is teaching that, right? It's very much like that. Is
Yeah,
to really, to appreciate the fertile soil. There is a real amazing Zen story that I really like about that I might share on another occasion. But today we are about half an hour over our allotted time limit, and we can continue if you guys find this topic fascinating, and we can continue reflecting. And I would love to hear also JC's story next time, and some of the reflections from everyone else. Please write to us, send us a message. I love to see all of the engagement in our today's circle. And yeah, let's keep failing more and more gracefully until we fail to fail, and then be truly alive with all of the elements, not just the poop. We don't have to sit in the poop all the time, but it's good once in a while for a fresh perspective, right? And continue to keep an inner and outer smile while we deal with all of the poop that is happening in the world today. Many blessings, everyone. Much love to all of you and all the people in your life. Take care of yourself and each other, and see you soon.